My daughter-in-law had a contractor measuring my backyard before anyone had asked whether I planned to sell the house. That was how I found out my son had been discussing my property behind my back. I had retired 6 months earlier after 38 years running a regional HVAC company in North Carolina. I sold my share to 2 longtime managers, paid the taxes, and kept enough to live comfortably without depending on anyone. Then I bought a modest brick house outside Asheville. Not a mansion, not an investment. A place with a screened porch, a workshop, and enough yard for a garden. It was the first thing I'd bought in years simply because I wanted it. My son, Evan, seemed happy for me. His wife, Brooke, was different. The first time she visited, she walked through every room slowly, not admiring it, assessing it. She asked what I'd paid, how much land came with it, whether the zoning allowed another structure. I answered most of her questions because, at the time, they seemed harmless. Then she stood at the back window and said, "You could fit at least 2 small cottages back there." I laughed. "I could also fit tomatoes." She smiled. "I'm serious." "So am I." That should have ended it. It didn't. 3 weeks later, Evan came by alone. We were sitting on the porch when he asked, "Would you ever consider selling this place?" I looked at him. "I just bought it." "I know. I mean eventually." "Eventually is a long time." He nodded, then stared into his coffee. "Brooke thinks this area is going to explode in value. Good for the area." "Dad." There was something in his voice I didn't like. "What?" "She has an investor who might be interested." "In my house?" "In the property." I set my mug down. "That sounds like the same thing." He rubbed the back of his neck. "She thinks the lot is worth more developed than it is as a single home. I'm not developing it." "I know." "Then why are we talking about it?" He didn't answer directly. "She gets excited about opportunities." That phrase stayed with me, not because it was strange, because it sounded rehearsed. The following Saturday, I was replacing a loose board on the porch when a white pickup stopped at the curb. A man stepped out carrying a laser measuring device and a rolled site plan. He walked toward the side gate. "Can I help you?" He looked up. "You Mr. Halpern?" "Yes. I'm with Ridgeway Residential." "Never heard of them." He glanced at his clipboard. "We're doing preliminary measurements for the rear lot project." I stood. "What rear lot project?" He looked confused, then embarrassed. 2 detached units, possibly 3 depending on setback. "On whose property?" He checked the address again. "Yours." "No." He looked at me for a second. "I'm sorry. I was told the owner had approved access." "Who told you that?" He hesitated. "Brooke Halpern, my daughter-in-law." I asked the contractor to leave. He did immediately. Then I went inside and called Evan. He answered on the second ring. "Dad, why is a contractor at my house measuring the backyard?" Silence. That was my first answer. "Evan, I didn't know they were coming today." "Not, I don't know what you're talking about." He knew. "How long have you known?" He exhaled. "Brooke has been talking to a developer about my property. She thinks there's a deal worth considering." "Did I ask her to consider one?" "No." "Did I give her permission to send people onto my property?" "No." He lowered his voice. "Dad, don't turn this into something bigger than it is." I looked through the back window. The contractor had left 2 small orange marking flags near the fence. Somebody had already started treating my yard like a project. I didn't make it bigger. "Brooke thinks the developer could offer a lot." "I don't care." "You haven't heard the number." "And I don't care about the number." He went quiet. Then he said something that changed the conversation completely. "She already told them you'd probably agree." I stood still. "Why would she say that?" "She thinks once you see the offer, you'll understand." "Understand what?" "That keeping the house doesn't make financial sense." I almost laughed. I had spent 38 years making decisions because they made financial sense. Retirement was supposed to be the part where I got to decide something because I wanted it. "Tell Brooke the answer is no." "Dad, no contractors, no developers, no offers arranged through her, nothing." He didn't respond. Then I asked, "Has she signed anything?" Another silence. Longer this time. My grip tightened on the phone. "Evan, I don't know exactly." That was worse than yes. "What does that mean?" "She had some kind of preliminary letter. Using my property?" "I think so." "Did you see it?" "Yes." "And you didn't call me." "I thought she'd talk to you first." I looked at the orange flags outside. She didn't. After we hung up, I walked into my office and opened the closing folder from when I'd bought the house. Everything appeared normal. Deed, survey, insurance. No sale agreement, no development contract. Then I checked my email. There was a message in my spam folder from a company I didn't recognize. Subject: confirmation of preliminary development interest. It had been sent 4 days earlier. I opened it. The first paragraph thanked me for authorizing Ridgeway Residential to evaluate redevelopment options for my property. I had authorized nothing. At the bottom was an attachment, a 1-page letter of consent. My name was typed beneath the signature line, and above it was a signature that looked enough like mine to make me read it twice. It wasn't mine. I didn't call Brooke. I called the closing attorney who had handled the purchase of the house. Her name was Denise Morgan. I forwarded the consent letter and told her exactly what had happened. She called me back 10 minutes later. Did you sign this? No. Did you authorize Evan or Brooke to sign anything for you? No. Then don't contact the developer yet. Why not? Because I want to know what they think they have. That made sense. Denise asked me to send the original email headers, the attachment, and any messages from Evan or Brooke mentioning the property. Then she told me to do one more thing. Take photos of those orange flags before you remove them. I did. Not because the flags mattered much, because somebody had acted on a document carrying my name. That mattered a lot. By noon, Denise had reached Ridgeway Residential. Their project manager called me directly. He sounded more nervous than the contractor had. Mr. Halpern, I apologize. We were under the impression your family was coordinating this. My family doesn't own the property. I understand that now. What exactly did Brooke give you? A letter of interest and preliminary access consent. Anything else? A copy of the survey and a tax record. I had both in my closing folder. That didn't mean much by itself. Public tax records were easy to get. The survey wasn't. Who sent the survey? Brooke. My stomach tightened. That meant she'd been inside my paperwork, or Evan had given it to her. Did she say she represented me? The project manager hesitated. She said she was helping coordinate the property on behalf of the family. That phrase irritated me more than it should have. On behalf of the family. There was no family decision. There was my house. Then he added, she also said your son would confirm the plan. I leaned back. Did he? Yes. That was new. When? Last week. I stared at the wall. Evan hadn't merely known Brooke was talking to a developer. He had confirmed enough for them to proceed. Did my son sign anything? No. He confirmed by email that the family was discussing redevelopment and that Brooke was authorized to coordinate preliminary work. That wasn't ownership authority, but it explained why Ridgeway had taken her seriously. I asked them to stop all activity involving my property. They agreed immediately. Then I called Evan. You confirmed Brooke was authorized? He didn't deny it. I said she could coordinate information. You said that about my house. I thought she'd get a proposal together and then you'd decide. No. You thought she'd build momentum until I felt pressured to say yes. That isn't fair. Then tell me what's fair. He was quiet. I could hear traffic behind him. Finally, he said, Brooke thinks you're sitting on a property that could be worth 3 times what you paid. That still doesn't make it hers. I know. Do you? That landed. He didn't answer. I continued. Where did she get my survey? Another pause. From me. I closed my eyes. Why did you have it? You emailed me a copy when you were buying the house. You asked me to look at the drainage easement. I remembered. He was right. Months earlier, before any of this, I'd sent him the full survey. That explained one mystery. Not the signature. Did you give her anything with my signature on it? No. Think. I didn't. I believed he meant that, which meant Brooke had found another source. That afternoon, I went through the house more carefully. I wasn't looking for missing valuables. I was looking for documents she could have seen. Brooke had been in my office several times. Once while I was making lunch. Once when she said she needed the printer. On the wall behind my desk were framed copies of old business awards and one retirement certificate. None had useful signatures. Then I opened the bottom drawer. There were old closing documents from the HVAC company. Several had my signature. I kept them because selling the company had been the biggest transaction of my life. The top folder was out of order. Again, that proved nothing. But I photographed everything and moved the documents into a locking cabinet. At 4:30, Denise called. I found the source of the development request. What source? Brooke submitted it through a small consulting company. Her company? Not exactly. It's registered to someone named Marissa Cole. I didn't recognize the name. Who is she? I'm still checking. Then Denise said something else. The consent letter wasn't the first document Brooke sent. I sat down. What was? A preliminary property profile. What does that mean? Estimated value, zoning, lot dimensions, redevelopment potential, all public information? Mostly. Mostly? There's also a note about your financial position. That got my attention. What note? Denise read it to me. Owner is recently retired, financially secure, and likely receptive to a high cash offer if presented as part of a family transition plan. I read the sentence back to make sure I'd heard it correctly. Family transition plan? Yes. I hadn't told Brooke I wanted to transition anything. Who wrote that? The profile lists Marissa Cole. I called Evan again. Who is Marissa Cole? Silence. Long enough to answer the question. You know her? Yes. Who is she? Brooke's sister. That was the first time her family entered the story. What does her sister have to do with my house? Evan's voice lowered. She works in private real estate acquisitions. I stood. And Brooke never mentioned that. No. Why? I don't know. I did. Because this wasn't just a daughter-in-law getting excited about an idea. Brooke had brought in her sister, a developer, and my son before I'd even been asked whether I wanted to sell. Then Evan said, Dad, there's something else I should have told you. I waited. Brooke didn't just talk to Ridgway. What did she do? She asked Marissa what your house, the workshop lot, and your old mountain cabin would be worth as a package. I gripped the phone tighter. My mountain cabin was 2 hours away. It had never been part of any conversation about retirement. Why would she ask that? Evan didn't answer immediately. Then he said, because she told Marissa you were probably going to simplify everything over the next few years. I stared through the window at the backyard. The house had been mine for 6 months. Apparently, Brooke had already started planning what came after it. I knew enough by then to stop treating Brooke's behavior like an over-enthusiastic sales pitch, but I still didn't know what she expected to gain. That question mattered. People rarely take risks like forging a signature just because they think someone else should make a better investment. The next morning, Denise called with an answer. Marissa's company receives acquisition fees. How much? It varies. On a redevelopment deal this size, potentially tens of thousands. So Brooke's sister gets paid if I sell. Yes. And Brooke? I haven't found anything showing she'd be paid directly. Not yet. I thanked her and went downstairs to the workshop. I had spent most of my career around equipment. When something failed, guessing usually made the repair more expensive. You checked one system at a time until the bad part identified itself. I decided to handle my family the same way. I called Evan and asked him to come over after work, alone. He arrived around 6, carrying takeout from a barbecue place I liked. Normally, that would have made me smile. That evening, it felt like an apology he hadn't figured out how to say. We ate at the kitchen table. I didn't mention Brooke until we'd finished. Then I put a printed copy of the property profile between us. Did you know about this? He read it. His expression changed when he reached the line about my financial position. No. Did you know Marissa could make money from the deal? He looked up. What? Acquisition fee. He leaned back. No. Brooke told me Marissa was helping because she knew the business. That answer seemed genuine. Did Brooke ever tell you why she cared this much about selling my house? She thinks you're wasting money. That isn't an answer. He stared at the paper. Finally, he said, we're having some problems. There it was. What kind? Money? How much? He rubbed his thumb against the edge of the table. More than I told you. I waited. Evan and Brooke had bought a large house in Charlotte 2 years earlier. I knew the mortgage was substantial, but both had good incomes. At least I thought they did. Brooke left her job in February, he said. That surprised me. She worked in marketing for a medical equipment company. Why? She wanted to start consulting. How's that going? Not well. He looked embarrassed. We've been covering things with savings. How much savings is left? Not much. That explained urgency. It didn't explain my property. Did she ask me for money? No. Why not? Evan gave a tired laugh. Because she knew what you'd say. What would I say? Show me the numbers. He knew me. And she didn't want to? She said borrowing from family would be humiliating. I looked at the document between us. So instead, she decided selling my house was less humiliating. He didn't defend her. That told me more than an argument would have. I asked one final question. What happens to you financially if I sell? Nothing. Think carefully. Dad, I don't get any of the money. That isn't what I asked. He went quiet. Then he looked toward the window. Brooke has talked about us moving here. To Asheville? Yes. When? If you sold? I waited. She said we'd use some of our home equity to buy something smaller here. Marissa could help us find a property. And? His face tightened. And she thought you'd probably help us with the down payment. There it was. No single conspiracy. No envelope with my money divided into neat percentages. Something more ordinary. And, in some ways, more believable. Brooke had constructed a future in which everyone benefited from a decision I hadn't made. Her sister earned a fee. Brooke escaped financial pressure. Evan moved closer to me, and I supplied the money that made the whole arrangement easier. The only person who hadn't been consulted was the man who owned the property. Did you agree to this? Not exactly. I looked at him. Evan, I said moving here might be good. That wasn't my question. He pushed his chair back slightly. I let her talk about it. That's closer. His eyes dropped. I should have stopped it. Yes, he nodded. No excuses. That was the first useful thing he'd done. Before he left, I asked him to send me every message he'd exchanged with Brooke or Marissa about my property. He hesitated. That's going to cause problems at home. You already have problems at home. He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. The emails arrived at 9:17 that night. Most were what I expected. Zoning links, property estimates, photos. One message from Brooke stood out. It was 6 weeks old. Once your dad sees what the land is worth, he'll come around. He always thinks logically. Evan had replied, maybe. Don't push him. Brooke, I'm not pushing. I'm giving him the right answer before he knows he needs it. I kept reading. 3 weeks later, Marissa had sent them a spreadsheet. The file contained 3 columns: current property, estimated sale, next step. My Asheville house was first. The mountain cabin was second. The third line stopped me. Halpern HVAC note, estimated remaining payout, $410,000. That wasn't real estate. It was money still owed to me from the sale of my company. Very few people knew the exact balance. Evan knew. I called him immediately. Did you tell Brooke how much the company still owes me? No. She's got the number. What? I sent him the spreadsheet. He called back less than a minute later. I never gave her that. Are you sure? Yes. Then where did she get it? I don't know. For once, I believed him without hesitation, because the figure wasn't approximate. It was exact. $410,000. The same number on the private payment schedule I kept in my home office. I went down the hall and opened the locking cabinet I'd started using 2 days earlier. The original agreement was there. Then I remembered something. The cabinet hadn't been locked when Brooke first started visiting. I checked the spreadsheet again. At the bottom was a 4th column I hadn't noticed. Projected family liquidity after consolidation, $1.86 million. I read the phrase twice. My house, my cabin, my company payout. Brooke hadn't been evaluating one property. She had been building a financial picture of nearly everything I owned. The spreadsheet changed the problem. Until then, I could tell myself Brooke had become fixated on one valuable piece of property. Now I knew she'd mapped out my finances. I sent the spreadsheet to Denise the next morning. She called before 9. Where did this come from? Brooke's email. And the company payout figure is accurate? To the dollar. Who had access to it? My accountant. My attorney from the sale. Me. And Evan? He knew the approximate amount when I sold the company, not the current balance. Denise was quiet. Then don't assume where she got it. Let's verify. That was why I trusted her. Facts first. Anger later. I called my former company's controller and asked whether anyone had requested information about my remaining payments. He checked. No. Then he paused. Actually, there was something in May. What? A verification request. From whom? Some financial planning firm. We didn't provide anything because there was no authorization attached. May was 2 months after I retired. Do you still have it? I can forward it. The email arrived 5 minutes later. The sender was a company I'd never heard of. The contact name wasn't Brooke. It was Marissa Cole. I forwarded that to Denise too. We now had a pattern. My daughter-in-law had looked through private paperwork. Her sister had contacted a company that owed me money. Together, they'd built a spreadsheet estimating what could be turned into cash. What I still didn't know was why they needed the total. That afternoon, Evan called from his car. Can I come over? Sure. Brooke knows I sent you the emails. How? I told her. I wasn't thrilled, but he was a grown man. I wasn't going to manage his marriage for him. How did that go? She says we're both making this sound worse than it is. Did you ask about the spreadsheet? Yes. And? She said it was planning. For whom? He didn't answer. That told me enough. He arrived 40 minutes later. This time there was no takeout. He put his phone on my kitchen table and opened a message thread. I found something. It was a conversation between Brooke and Marissa from earlier that spring. I read from the beginning. Most of it was ordinary. Then Marissa wrote, Ridgway won't spend serious time unless we can show the family is motivated. Brooke replied, Evan will be. He hates conflict with his dad. I glanced at my son. His face had gone red. I kept reading. Marissa. And Richard? Brooke. He'll say no first. That's what he does when he thinks he's being rushed. Give him numbers and let Evan work on him. It was unpleasant, but it wasn't the worst message. 2 days later, if Asheville works, the cabin should be easy. Once he starts consolidating, we keep him moving. Marissa replied, what's the end goal? Brooke's answer was one sentence. Get him liquid before he starts giving things away or changing beneficiaries. I stopped reading. Evan stared at the table. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Finally, I asked, giving things away to whom? I don't know. Did I ever tell you I was changing my estate plan? No, I hadn't. My will hadn't changed in 7 years. Evan was my only child. He already stood to inherit most of what remained someday. Someday. That word suddenly seemed important. Brooke wasn't afraid I'd spend everything. She was afraid I might decide to do something with my own property before it became theirs. Does Brooke think she's in my will? I asked. Evan looked uncomfortable. Not directly. Then why is she worried about beneficiaries? I think she sees whatever comes to me as ours. That isn't how my estate plan works. I know that. Does she? He looked at me. I don't think she ever asked. That almost made it worse. She hadn't needed facts. She had built a future around assumptions. I handed the phone back. Go home. Dad, I'm not angry at you for showing me this. He waited. I need to decide what I'm going to do without you sitting here feeling like you have to choose between us every 5 minutes. His jaw tightened. I already chose wrong once. That doesn't mean I need you to choose correctly on command. He nodded slowly. At the door, he stopped. What are you going to do? Protect what I own. From Brooke? From anyone who thinks retirement made me easier to manage. The next morning, I met Denise at her office. We didn't discuss revenge. We discussed boring things. Written notice to Ridgeway withdrawing any supposed consent. A fraud alert on my credit. New passwords. A locked mailbox for financial documents. A review of every account authorization. Then my estate plan. I made one change. Not to punish Evan. To remove ambiguity. Any inheritance intended for him would remain his separate property through a trust structure Denise recommended I discuss with an estate specialist. Brooke would have no authority over my assets while I was alive. Nobody would, unless I explicitly appointed them. When we finished, Denise closed the folder. There's one more issue. What? The signature. The forged consent letter. Ridgeway had sent her the original electronic submission. It included metadata. The file had been created on Brooke's laptop. That still didn't prove who had drawn the signature. But Denise had found something else. The document had been uploaded from an account registered to Brooke's personal email. I leaned back. So she submitted it. Yes. Can Ridgeway confirm that? They already have. I nodded. For the first time, we had something direct. Not a family interpretation. Not an overheard conversation. Not Evan's opinion. A document submitted from Brooke's account, containing a signature I hadn't made. Denise watched me. What do you want to do? I want the development stopped. It is. I want written confirmation that nobody can represent me regarding either property. We can do that, and I want copies of everything preserved. She nodded. Anything else? Not yet. I wasn't interested in creating a dramatic confrontation. I wanted Brooke to tell me what she'd done when she still believed I couldn't prove it. I got that opportunity sooner than expected. At 6:12 that evening, my doorbell rang. Brooke stood outside alone. She looked composed, almost cheerful. Can we talk? I opened the door but didn't invite her farther than the living room. She sat. I remained standing. Evan told me you're upset. Did he? He thinks I've crossed some enormous boundary. Have you? She gave a small sigh. I was trying to help everyone. By putting my signature on a development consent? Her expression didn't change immediately. Then it did. Just slightly. I didn't forge anything. I waited. The document wasn't binding. That wasn't my question. It was preliminary. Still not my question. She stood. You're making this very personal. It has my name on it. That usually makes something personal. Her voice sharpened. Nothing was going to happen without your final approval. Then why pretend you already had my preliminary approval? She didn't answer. I let the silence sit between us. Finally, she picked up her purse. You know what? Keep the house. Keep the cabin. None of this is worth destroying a family over. I looked at her. I haven't asked you for either one. She moved toward the door. Then I asked the question I'd been saving. Why did you need me liquid before I changed my beneficiaries? She stopped. Her back was still toward me. For 3 or 4 seconds, she didn't move. Then she turned around. And for the first time since I'd known her, Brooke didn't have an answer ready. She only said, "Where did you see that?" Not "I never said that." Not "What are you talking about?" Just, "Where did you see that?" That was enough. But what she said next was worse. "You need to ask Evan what he's been hiding from you." Then she walked out. Brooke's last sentence bothered me for one reason. It sounded specific, not like something thrown out during an argument. I called Evan. "I need you to come over." He arrived 40 minutes later. I repeated exactly what Brooke had said. He didn't look confused. He looked sick. "What are you hiding?" He sat at the kitchen table but didn't remove his jacket. "It's not what she made it sound like." "Then make it sound like what it is." He rubbed both palms over his face. "Brooke and I are in more trouble financially than I told you." "I already know that." "No. You know about the savings." I waited. He looked at me. "We borrowed against the house." "How much?" $85,000. That was bad, but not enough to explain his expression. "What else?" "Credit cards, about 40. I pulled out the chair across from him. "And?" He stared at the tabletop. "I guaranteed part of Brooke's consulting line of credit." "How much?" 75. I did the arithmetic without reaching for a calculator. They were roughly $200,000 deeper than I'd known. "Is that what you've been hiding?" "Part of it, of course." "What else?" "Marissa put money into Brooke's business." "How much?" 50,000. Now Brooke's sister made more sense. She wasn't simply helping arrange a profitable real estate transaction. She wanted her money back. Does Marissa expect you to repay her? Brooke says it was an investment. Marissa says it was a loan. Is there paperwork? I haven't seen any. I leaned back. There it was again. A family making major financial decisions first and worrying about documents afterward. Where do I fit into this? Evan's eyes finally met mine. Brooke thought if you sold the Asheville house and cabin, you'd give me part of the money early, an inheritance. He nodded once. While I'm alive, I told her you wouldn't. But you didn't tell me. No. Why? His answer took a while. Because I was embarrassed. That I understood. I didn't excuse it, but I understood it. Evan told me the rest without much prompting. Brooke had started talking about an early inheritance shortly after I sold the company. At first, he'd dismissed it. Then their finances deteriorated. The idea stopped sounding ridiculous and started sounding convenient. He never asked me for the money. Instead, he allowed Brooke to believe I could be persuaded. That was his part in it. Not forgery, not the spreadsheet, not contacting developers. Silence. Sometimes silence doesn't create the problem. It simply gives the problem room to grow. Did you know she was looking through my financial documents? No. Did you know she had the exact company payout? No. Did you know about the fake signature? No. He looked me straight in the eye. I believed him. Then he said, "There is one thing I did know." I waited. She asked me who your beneficiaries were. When? About 2 months ago. What did you tell her? That I was your primary beneficiary as far as I knew. Why was she asking? She said we needed to understand our long-term finances. I almost interrupted. Didn't. She asked whether you had talked about donating anything. That caught me. Donating? Yes. I knew exactly where that had come from. Several months earlier, I'd mentioned over dinner that I was considering funding scholarships for students entering the skilled trades. Nothing extravagant. Just something I'd been thinking about after selling the company. Brooke had asked several questions. I had forgotten the conversation. She hadn't. How much did you tell her? Nothing. I didn't know. I stood and walked to the window. So that was the urgency. Not my age, not retirement, not the property market. Brooke had realized that the money she considered Evan's future inheritance might not remain untouched indefinitely. She had started trying to convert my assets into cash before I made decisions she couldn't influence. The logic was ugly, but it was finally complete. Evan stayed at my house that night, not because I asked him to. At around 10, Brooke texted him that she didn't want him home until he decided whose family he was part of. He showed me the message. I handed the phone back. That's between you and your wife. You don't have an opinion? I have several. None of them will make the decision for you. He gave a tired half smile. You always do that. Do what? Make people answer their own question. It saves time. For the first time that evening, he laughed. Only briefly. Then his phone buzzed again. This time it was Marissa. We need to resolve this before Richard's lawyer turns it into something it isn't. Evan showed me. I took a screenshot with his permission. Then another message appeared. Brooke was trying to protect your future. You know that? Evan typed. By signing Dad's name, the typing indicator appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, that document was never supposed to be used beyond feasibility. I looked at Evan. He looked at me. Neither of us needed to say it. Marissa had just acknowledged knowing about the document. Evan typed one more question. Did you know Dad hadn't signed it? This time there was no response. The next morning, I sent the exchange to Denise. She called me immediately. This helps. What happens now? That depends on what you want. I had spent most of the night thinking about exactly that. I don't want money from them. Good. I don't want some theatrical lawsuit that takes 2 years. Also good. I want my property out of their business permanently. We can accomplish that. And I want Ridgway to document exactly what Brooke and Marissa submitted. They've agreed. I paused. Then I want Evan to deal with his marriage himself. Denise was silent for a moment. That may be the hardest part. I know. By Friday, Ridgway had provided the complete file. Brooke had submitted the consent. Marissa had provided the property analysis. The developer had never paid either woman, and no purchase contract existed. That mattered. The situation was serious, but I wasn't going to turn it into something larger just because anger made a better story. Denise sent formal notices making clear that neither Brooke, Marissa, nor Evan had authority to represent me. The developer closed the file. The Asheville project was dead. The cabin had never progressed beyond a spreadsheet. My company payments were untouched. My accounts were untouched. My house was mine. That should have felt like victory. It didn't. Because Saturday morning, Evan received an email from Marissa containing an attachment. He forwarded it to me. It was a draft agreement between Brooke and Marissa, never signed, never completed. But the terms explained what Brooke had been trying to build. If Marissa successfully arranged the sale of either of my properties, Part of her acquisition fee would be credited against the $50,000 she claimed Brooke owed her. And there was another clause. If Evan received an early distribution from me, Brooke intended to use part of it to repay Marissa and stabilize their household debts. I read it twice. There was no sophisticated master plan, no secret fortune, no hidden corporation, just debt, entitlement, family pressure, and one assumption that had infected every decision, that sooner or later, my money would become theirs. Evan stood across from me in the workshop while I folded the document. "What are you going to do?" he asked. "Nothing about your marriage." He nodded. "And Brooke? She won't be involved in my finances again. Ever?" I looked at him. "She didn't make one bad decision, Evan. She spent months making plans around property she didn't own." He lowered his eyes. "I know." Then I handed him the draft agreement. "You need to decide whether that's the person you want making plans with what belongs to you." He took the pages. This time, I wasn't the one facing the next decision. My son was. Evan didn't make his decision that weekend. I was glad. If he'd walked out of my workshop and announced he was ending his marriage, I would have wondered whether he was reacting to humiliation instead of thinking clearly. He went home. For 3 days, I heard nothing. I went back to my routine: coffee at 6, a walk before breakfast, a few hours in the workshop restoring an old walnut desk I'd bought at an estate sale. For the first time in weeks, nobody came to measure anything. On Wednesday evening, Evan called. "Brooke and I are separating." I put down the piece of sandpaper in my hand. "Are you sure?" "Yes." "What happened?" I asked her one question. I waited. I asked what she would have done if you'd said no to every sale and never gave me any money. And she said that wasn't realistic. I understood immediately. Not we'd deal with our debts. Not we'd sell our own house. Not we'd cut expenses. My refusal simply hadn't existed in her version of the future. Evan continued. So I asked again, "What if Dad keeps everything until he's 95 and spends half of it?" What did she say? She got angry. That sounded more revealing than any answer. She said I'd spent my whole life being afraid to ask you for what was eventually going to be mine. I looked around my workshop, the tools, the half-finished desk, the house beyond the door. Eventually, there was that word again. What did you tell her? That nothing you own is eventually mine unless you decide it is. I didn't say anything for a moment. Then I asked, "Where are you staying?" "A hotel tonight. I'll figure something out. You can use the guest room for a week." "Dad, I don't want—" "A week, not forever." He laughed quietly. "Okay." That was help I could give without solving his life for him. The separation didn't fix Evan's finances. If anything, it made them worse. He and Brooke listed their Charlotte house. They canceled a vacation they'd booked months earlier. Evan sold a truck he didn't need and replaced it with a 6-year-old sedan. None of those decisions were dramatic. They were simply expensive mistakes being paid for by the people who had made them. Marissa contacted me once through an attorney. Her attorney claimed she'd never intended to misrepresent ownership and had relied on information supplied by Brooke. Denise answered with the documents Ridgway had preserved. We heard nothing further. Brooke sent me one email. It was short. She said she'd been trying to protect her marriage from financial collapse and had convinced herself that because Evan would probably inherit from me one day, using that future in their planning wasn't unreasonable. I read it twice. Then I archived it. I didn't respond. An explanation can make behavior understandable without making it acceptable. 2 months later, Evan met me for breakfast. He looked better, not happier exactly, more settled. The Charlotte house had an offer. If the sale closed, they could clear the home equity balance and most of the joint consumer debt. The business line was more complicated. Their attorneys were sorting out responsibility for it as part of the separation. "What about Marissa's $50,000? I asked. "Brooke says it was an investment. Marissa still says loan." "Sounds familiar." He smiled. "Yeah." Then his expression became serious. "I owe you an apology. You already apologized. Not for the right thing." I waited. I kept telling myself I hadn't done what Brooke did. I didn't sign your name. I didn't contact Ridgway. I didn't go through your office. All true. But I knew she was trying to get you to sell. Yes. And I let it happen because part of me liked the idea that our financial problem might disappear without me having to tell you we'd screwed up. That was the first time he'd said it that plainly. I took a sip of coffee. "That's the part you need to remember." He nodded. "I will. Not because you owe me guilt." He looked up. "Because the next time somebody offers you a solution that depends on another person paying for your choices, you should get uncomfortable early." He smiled faintly. "That sounds like something you told employees." "Probably. I repeated myself for 38 years. That got a real laugh. Before we left, Evan asked, "Did you change your will?" I looked at him. He immediately raised both hands. "I'm not asking what's in it. Good. I just wondered if you changed it because of me. I could have avoided the question. Instead, I answered it. I changed how things would be managed. I didn't erase you from my life. He nodded. That seems fair. More importantly, it isn't your decision. I know. And this time, I believed he did. The following spring, I finally built the garden I'd joked about when Brooke first mentioned cottages. Tomatoes, peppers, green beans. Nothing impressive. One Saturday, Evan came up from Charlotte to help me repair the fence around it. We worked most of the morning without talking about Brooke, money, developers, or inheritance. Around noon, he pulled one of the old orange survey flags from a shelf in the workshop. I'd forgotten I'd kept it. He held it up. You know, this stupid thing started everything. No. He looked at me. It exposed everything. There was a difference. Brooke hadn't created their debt by measuring my backyard. She hadn't created Evan's habit of avoiding difficult conversations. And she hadn't created my boundaries. The flag had simply forced all of us to stop pretending those things weren't there. Evan tossed it into the trash. Then he looked through the workshop door toward the garden. So you're definitely not putting 3 cottages back there? Absolutely not. 2? I looked at him. He grinned. For once, the joke didn't bother me, because now we both knew who got to make that decision. By summer, Evan and Brooke's house had sold. The proceeds didn't make either of them rich. They paid off the home equity loan, cleared most of the joint debt, and gave their attorneys enough clean numbers to finish separating the rest. Evan rented a 1-bedroom apartment outside Charlotte. Brooke moved somewhere closer to her sister. I didn't ask where. The divorce became final in September. There was no dramatic courtroom moment, no last-minute confession, no judge delivering a speech about family, just signatures, divided accounts, and 2 people leaving a marriage with considerably less than they'd entered it with. That seemed consequence enough. Around the same time, I finally did something Brooke had been worried I might do. I created the scholarship program. Nothing enormous. Each year, it would help a handful of young people in Western North Carolina pay for HVAC, electrical, plumbing, or welding training. I funded it with part of the money still coming from the sale of my company. When I told Evan, we were sitting on my screened porch. He smiled. That's what she was afraid of. I know. Does that bother you? What? That she was right about you giving some of it away? I thought about that. No. The money was mine when I saved it, mine when I invested it, and mine when I gave some of it away. That was the point everyone had nearly forgotten. Evan nodded toward the backyard. The garden had taken over more space than I'd planned. Tomato vines leaned against their cages, and I'd already given bags of vegetables to 3 neighbors. What about this place? He asked. What about it? You staying? I've been here a year. You still think I'm moving? He laughed. No. Then his expression changed. Actually, I don't think I ever thought you wanted to move. That caught my attention. What do you mean? I think I wanted Brooke to be right, because it would have made my problems easier. It wasn't pleasant to hear, but it was honest. I respected that more. You know what bothered me most? I asked. The signature? That was the most serious part. He waited. But the thing I kept thinking about was you sitting on this porch and asking whether I'd consider selling when you already knew Brooke was working on it. He looked down. I know. You gave me half the conversation because the whole conversation would have required you to take a position. He nodded slowly. I won't do that again. I didn't tell him I believed him. Trust doesn't need to be announced every time it improves. You notice it later, in smaller things. That happened a few months afterward. Evan called one evening. Dad, I need your opinion. About what? A job. He'd been offered a position with another commercial property firm. Better salary, more travel. He explained the numbers, the benefits, the downside. Then he stopped. I waited for the familiar question. What should I do? Instead, he said, I've decided not to take it. Why? I don't want my life built around the biggest number anymore. I smiled. That sounds expensive. It is. Then make sure it's worth it. He laughed. That's the opinion I called for. That was different. He wasn't asking me to solve anything. He'd made his decision and was prepared to own it. I never heard directly from Brooke again. Marissa never contacted me either. Ridgway's file stayed closed. Nobody built cottages behind my house. Nobody touched the cabin. Nobody touched the remaining company payments. And nobody in my family had authority over any of it. The safeguards Denise helped me put in place remained. I didn't remove them when the anger faded. Boundaries aren't punishment. They're simply decisions made in advance. The next spring, Evan came up for the weekend. We spent Saturday morning at the mountain cabin repairing a section of dock damaged during the winter. At lunch, we sat near the water with sandwiches and watched a fishing boat cross the lake. Evan looked toward the cabin. Brooke wanted you to sell this too, I remember. I used to look at it and see what it was worth. And now? He shrugged. Now I see you sitting out here when I was 10, pretending you knew how to fish. I knew how. You hooked your own jacket. Once. Twice. I let that go. A few minutes later, he said, I'm glad you kept it. I looked at him. That's nice. He smiled. But whether you're glad isn't the reason I kept it. He laughed. Fair enough. That was the relationship we had now. Better than before in some ways. Less comfortable in others. More honest. I could live with that. I retired because I thought I was finished making difficult decisions. I was wrong. Retirement only changed what the decisions were about. For 38 years, people had asked me about payroll, contracts, equipment, expansion, and cash flow. Then suddenly the questions became more personal. What did I want to keep? What did I want to give away? Who could I trust? How much access should family have simply because they were family? Those questions were harder, but the answer I eventually reached was simple. Evan may inherit something from me someday. Maybe a great deal. Maybe less than he expects. That's for later. Today, the house is mine. The cabin is mine. The money from the company is mine. And deciding what happens to those things isn't selfish. It's ownership. Last weekend, I was working in the garden when another white pickup slowed in front of the house. For half a second, I thought about that contractor and the orange flags. Then the truck continued down the road. I went back to tying up the tomatoes. No phone calls, no lawyers, no spreadsheets. Just a quiet Saturday afternoon on property nobody else was planning for anymore. That was all I'd wanted when I retired, and this time, everyone understood it.